This footage captures the last moments Grace Millane was seen, safe and sound. The young British woman had agreed to go on a date with someone she had just met on Tinder. She expected an exciting first date, unaware that this casual encounter would soon take a dark turn. By morning, Grace Millane's name would dominate the news, but not for the reasons she ever imagined. This is the story of Grace Millane, and the horrific crime that shocked New Zealand so deeply that even the country's president had to speak out and apologize to Grace's family. But before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to stay updated on our latest true crime stories.
On behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
Grace Millane was a 22-year-old British backpacker from Wickford, Essex, who had set out on a once-in-a-lifetime journey to explore the world. Described as kind, adventurous, and full of life, she had recently graduated from the University of Lincoln and was traveling across continents. Before reaching New Zealand, Grace had traveled to Peru and spent 10 days hopping from island to island. Despite being miles away, Grace stayed in frequent contact with her family and friends. She called every day, sharing photos of breathtaking places and stories of the people she met. However, her thrilling adventure came to a sudden halt on December 2nd. The day Grace went missing was also her birthday. Family and friends flooded her phone with messages and calls to wish her a happy birthday, but none received a reply. It was unlike her, not just because she checked in every day, but also because her family knew she had two cell phones, one used as a backup to ensure she could always stay in touch. Yet, since December 2nd, both had gone straight to voicemail. Concern quickly turned into fear. By December 5th, her family reported her missing to local police in Auckland, New Zealand, the place she was last seen. Receiving the report, Auckland police quickly held a press conference, urging anyone who had seen Grace to come forward. But days passed, and there was still no sign of her. Across the world, Grace's father, David Millane, couldn't sit and wait any longer. Desperate for answers, he flew to New Zealand. With the support of local authorities, he made a heartfelt plea to the public, hoping someone, anyone, had information.
We are all extremely upset, and it is very difficult at this time to fully describe the range of emotions we are going through. While we are very grateful for the media coverage both here and back home, we are finding this situation quite upsetting, and would sincerely hope that the media continue to respect our privacy. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to appeal to anybody who has seen, spoken to, or come into contact with Grace over the last few days, and to come forward with any detail, no matter how small, and contact the investigation team.
In the meantime, Auckland police rushed to piece together Grace's last known movements, and very soon they made a disturbing discovery. On December 1st, 2018, CCTV footage from Grace's hostel captured her leaving at exactly 5:37 p.m. She walked to Sky City, a bar and casino nearby, and waited for a moment. Soon, a man approached and greeted her with a hug. It was Jesse Kempson, the man she had met on Tinder. After exchanging a few messages, she had agreed to go on a date with him. For the next 90 minutes, they stayed at Sky City, having drinks and chatting. They seemed to be getting along well, so they decided to continue their night at another spot, the Mexican Cafe. More drinks followed, and then they moved to a third location, the Bluestone Room. At the Bluestone Room, the atmosphere grew more intimate as the couple became increasingly affectionate with each other. At the Bluestone Room, the atmosphere grew more intimate as the couple became increasingly affectionate with each other. Then, when Jessie briefly stepped away to use the restroom, Grace took a moment to message a friend back home. She shared that she was having a great time and felt a real connection with her date. "I click with him so well," she wrote. When Jessie returned, they carried on with their date. Eventually, at exactly 9:40 p.m., CCTV captured them holding hands, walking toward the City Life Hotel, where Jessie had rented an apartment. Security cameras followed them into the building's elevator. They rode up together and stepped out onto the floor of Jesse's apartment. From that moment on, Grace's exciting Tinder date took a dark turn. She walked into a stranger's apartment and never made it out alive. What really happened between Grace and her perfect Tinder match? The next morning, on December 2nd, investigators meticulously reviewed the CCTV footage from Jesse's apartment, hoping to see Grace leaving. But she was nowhere to be seen. Instead, they discovered footage of Jesse entering the elevator alone and later walking out of the building. His posture was straight, his expression calm, yet it was all a facade. Jesse Kempson was on his way to cover up his crime, unaware that cameras were recording his every move. His first stop was a store, where he bought a handful of cleaning supplies and a large suitcase. He returned to his apartment, placed the new purchases inside, and left again, this time heading straight for a taxi. The cab took him to a car rental facility where he picked up a vehicle. But instead of lying low, he made a bizarre decision. Jesse went on another Tinder date. He met the woman at a bar, acting as if nothing was wrong. At first, the date seemed ordinary, but things quickly took a disturbing turn. Jesse casually brought up the best places to hide a dead body. The woman, now uneasy, cut the night short and went home. She would later describe him as super creepy. But Jesse wasn't done. After the failed date, he returned to his apartment building and made another odd request. He stopped at the front desk and asked to borrow a Rug Doctor carpet steam cleaner. He took it up to his apartment and remained inside for hours, scrubbing away at something unseen. When he finally reappeared on CCTV, he was pushing a hotel luggage cart toward his room. Minutes later, he emerged again, this time with the cart loaded down with a large suitcase and several smaller bags. He wheeled everything down to his rental car and packed it inside before driving away. The next morning at 7 a.m. on December 3rd, Jesse was spotted at a store purchasing a brand new shovel. By 9 a.m., he was back at his apartment, but not for long. He stopped at a random trash can, tossing out some unidentified items before heading to a dry cleaning service to get his clothes washed. To cover his tracks even further, he took his rental car in for a full interior and exterior cleaning. 2 days later, on December 5, 2018, CCTV captured Jesse again, tossing more items into another random trash can. With all the evidence gathered, police pieced together a timeline of Jesse Kempson's actions and brought him in for interrogation.
Tell us about Grace.
So I was talking to Grace on Tinder. We'd matched on Friday. I saw that we'd matched the next day on Saturday. And then we met at Sky City. And then we decided that we were going up to Andy's Burger Bar.
The interrogation began with officers asking Jesse about the timeline of his date. At first, he appeared honest and innocent, calmly recounting what had happened. When asked to provide a DNA sample, he quickly cooperated and firmly denied any wrongdoing. However, in just the next moment, the investigator got Jesse panicked as he pressed him about being a potential suspect in Grace Mullane's disappearance.
We don't know what's happened to this girl.
Okay.
It's possible that somebody has killed her. Okay.
Okay.
You understand that?
Yeah.
She might, when I say foul play, I mean that someone might have murdered her. But she might also be dead.
Okay.
Okay? And it could be that you've done it.
As the interview continued, police asked Jesse how the date had ended. That was the moment he began to spin his lies. He claimed that nothing unusual had happened. They had parted ways around 10 a.m. with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. According to Jesse, they had even planned to meet again, but after that night, he was unable to contact her on Tinder. Despite what Jesse had said, police had solid evidence that exposed his lies. The earlier footage showed Jesse bringing Grace into his apartment, but she was never seen leaving. Wasting no time, they secured a search warrant for his apartment and launched a forensic investigation. Though he had tried to clean up, luminol revealed traces of blood seeping around the edges of his carpet, proving that something horrific had happened there. Forensic analysts revealed that Grace was strangled with his bare hands for 5 to 10 minutes, a prolonged act that would have caused immense suffering. The blood traces found on the carpet suggest post-mortem bleeding from her nose or mouth. She would have lost consciousness within 30 seconds to a minute, but Kempson continued applying pressure until she was dead. Detectives also uncovered a chilling trail of evidence. Between December 1st and December 7th, Jesse had made a series of disturbing Google searches, including the hottest fire, large bags near me, way to carry ranges, are there vultures in New Zealand, and flesh-eating birds. These searches, made shortly after Grace Mullane's death, revealed Kempson's desperate attempts to find ways to dispose of her body. Even more horrifying, they found photos that Jess took of Grace before placing her inside the suitcase he had purchased. This further exposes his sadistic nature, proving his murder act was not simply an accident. With these damning discoveries, investigators brought Jesse back in for questioning on December 7th, just 2 days after his first interview. This time, faced with the evidence, he changed his story. Jesse admitted to bringing Grace back to his apartment, where they had consensual sex that night. However, he claimed that he couldn't remember how she had died.
Started talking to me about 50 Shades of Grey, which is a sex fantasy movie that's out. We started having sex. At first it was just normal. It was very placid. And then she asked me if we could get into bondage, having, I guess, more violent sex. We ended up on the floor. And then she told me to hold her throat. So I went into the shower. And then all I remember is falling asleep in the shower.
Jesse claimed that when he walked back into his bedroom, he found Grace Mullane dead. He stated that he didn't know what had happened and that there was blood everywhere. The next morning, panicked and completely out of his wits, he stuffed her body into a suitcase and drove off to bury her.
I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I went downstairs and I was just, I don't know, I was all over the place. I didn't believe what had happened. I was just terrified and scared. I thought that she had gone. I thought she had left.
Even at this point, Jesse Kempson continued to make up stories, refusing to take responsibility for his murder. However, with overwhelming evidence from CCTV footage and forensic tests, his time was up.
Pathologist, specialist doctor will perform a post-mortem. Yeah. They're very skilled at establishing people's causes of death. Do you understand that? Yeah. Did you kill Grace Mullane? Okay. You're under arrest for the murder of Grace Mullane on or about the 2nd of December. You understand?
Jesse Kempson was officially charged and taken into police custody. But even with the murderer caught, the investigation was far from over, especially when Grace Mullane's body was still missing. Determined to uncover the truth, investigators turned to Jesse's digital footprint, which ultimately led to his downfall. His Google search history and GPS data pointed them to the rugged way to carry ranges. There, buried in a shallow grave, they found a suitcase with Grace's body inside. With Grace's body discovered, the case against Jesse Kempson was undeniable, but the battle in court was just beginning. The murder trial began on November 4, 2019, with a jury of 7 women and 5 men tasked with deciding Jesse Kempson's fate. The prosecution presented evidence that Kempson had deliberately strangled Grace to death in his hotel room after meeting her on a Tinder date, then disposed of her body in a suitcase buried in the Waitakere Ranges. Their case stood strong, backed by concrete evidence and Jesse's own confession during the police interview. Jesse Kempson was the murderer of Grace Mullane. That's the truth that no one could deny. Not even the defense team could oppose that claim. However, to spare their client from the harshest possible sentence, the defense tried to change the narrative, relying on a controversial strategy known as the 50 Shades defense. This tactic had been used in previous cases, claiming that injuries or even death resulting from consensual rough sex should be seen as accidents rather than intentional violence or murder. In the past, it had successfully reduced charges in several similar cases. The defense team believed that this strategy could reduce Jesse's charge from murder to manslaughter. This defense strategy sparked public outrage. Many believed it was just a way to shift the blame onto the victim, leaving people worried that Jesse might get off with a lighter sentence than he deserved. Fortunately, those fears never became reality. On July 6, 2020, British MPs passed a new provision in the Domestic Abuse Bill, officially banning this defense in court. This long-overdue reform made it clear that consent for sex could never be used as an excuse for violence or death. Along with the new provision, the prosecution presented undeniable forensic evidence. They pointed out Grace's neck showed signs of prolonged pressure, consistent with intentional strangulation. After just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. On November 22, 2019, they unanimously found Jesse Kempson guilty of murder. 3 months later, on February 21, 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 17 years before parole eligibility. However, Kempson's crimes didn't stop with Grace. As his conviction made headlines, other victims began to come forward. In October 2020, he faced a separate trial involving an ex-partner whom he had physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. The court found him guilty on all 8 charges, including sexual violation, assault with a weapon, and threatening to kill. Karma didn't let Jesse catch a break. A month later, in November 2020, he stood trial again, this time for raping another woman he had met on Tinder. Once again, the judge found him guilty. With these additional crimes, Kempson received another 7.5 years for abuse and 3.5 years for rape, though these sentences would be served concurrently with his life sentence. For nearly 2 years, Kempson's name had been shielded by a court-ordered suppression order. But on December 22, 2020, the Supreme Court lifted the ban, finally revealing his identity to the public. During his trial and time in jail, desperate to escape justice, he appealed his murder conviction in August 2020, but the Court of Appeal dismissed it in December of that year. He made one final attempt, taking his case to the Supreme Court. But in June 2021, his request was denied, making his conviction final. These trials didn't just secure justice for Grace Mullane. They exposed Jesse Kempson as a serial predator, ensuring he would remain behind bars for his violent crimes against multiple women. Today, Jesse Kempson remains behind bars at Auckland Prison in New Zealand, a predator whose lies could no longer protect him.
Grace was taken away from us in the most brutal fashion a year ago, and our lives and family have been ripped apart.
Grace Mullane's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the dangers that can hide behind a friendly smile. But it also stands as proof that justice can prevail, thanks to the voices that refuse to let her be forgotten. Grace's case not only brought justice for her, but also helped other women who had suffered similar horrors and were fortunate enough to survive. Though her life was taken in the most brutal way, Grace Mullane's memory will forever be honored for the light and kindness she brought into the world. That brings us to the end of today's episode. What are your thoughts on this case? We'd love to hear them in the comments below. If you found this video engaging, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe.